This is Cornstalks and Sports Talk, your go-to Iowa-based sports show, hosted by the one and only Eliot Clough.
What's up, Cedar Valley, and hello to the Hawkeye State. This is Cornstalks and Sports Talk, your Iowa-based sports show here on AM 950, KOEL, and KOEL.com from 9 to 10. My name is Eliot Clough, at Eliot Clough on Twitter. I'm a UNI insider for Town Square Media. We got great stuff ahead on today's show. David Eickholt from 24/7 Sports and HawkeyeInsider.com. He joins us to talk about the craziness that is going on in Iowa City with their football program right now. Of course, Keegan Johnson, Arlen Bruce, and now Gavin Williams have entered the portal. Who knows at the time that this show is going to air on Saturday morning if another player has entered the portal by now. And then, of course, Cade McNamara deciding to commit to play for the Hawkeyes. We did record on Thursday, so it's a little bit behind. The show is still relevant. We do talk about the possibility of other guys entering the portal, the implications of what if Cade McNamara decided to commit, which he did. So it's all still relevant. And then Alyssa Hertel from the Des Moines Register. She's their Drake men's basketball beat writer. She joins to tell us about the Bulldogs season thus far. And then we talk about the MVC too. But like I said, and I'll remind you of it before the segment, we are a little bit behind on Eickholt. So I just can't. I can't not talk about that Iowa stuff a little bit more and share some of my own opinions, because obviously I didn't know that McNamara was going to commit. Arlen Bruce and Gavin Williams would be entering the portal too. And who knows what else is going to happen in the next coming weeks, maybe even months, maybe even days, hours with the Iowa football program. But we got to talk about the state of affairs in Iowa City right now. I mean, like, we've seen this happen before. We've seen guys transfer out of Iowa, but not at this rate, and not guys that were that important right after the season, not even waiting till after the bowl game to enter the portal. Of course, Charlie Jones, Tyrone Tracy, and Desmond Hudson entered the portal last season, but three guys within a 24-hour period, and Padilla and Josh Volk. I'm sure there's more to come. This is insanity. This is madness. Whoever plays quarterback between Joey Labus and Spencer Petras in that bowl game isn't going to have anybody to throw to other than Luke Lachey, and hopefully Sam Laporta's healthy, of course. But, wow. Like, I mean, who knows? Maybe Deontay Vines isn't going to be around either. With all that said, we've been over this. If Kirk Ferentz does not fire his son, or Brian Ferentz doesn't step down at the end of this season, somebody's going to burn Kinnick to the ground, burn Iowa City to the ground, burn the state of Iowa to the ground, and I'd be cheering them on while they did it. Not that I'm a Hawkeye fan, but good Lord, it is so tough to watch the Iowa offense, and it has been. To have the Iowa offense not rank any better than 88th in the country in the entirety of his career, it's time, man. It's been more than time. And, I mean, You get this legit quarterback to commit in Cade McNamara, and then Arlen Bruce and Gavin Williams still decide that they don't want to play there. Keegan Johnson more than likely already knew that McNamara was going to be there, and he's still gone. There's no way around it. There's no way to even consider bringing Brian Ferentz back, even if they score 60 points against whoever it is they face in a bowl game. If Joey Labus throws for 500 yards and 6 touchdowns, you still get rid of Brian Ferentz. It's inexcusable to bring that guy back. On top of everything else that's already happened, these guys are leaving in droves. There's talent out the wazoo that's just leaving, getting out of Dodge, and I don't blame them. You got to get rid of Brian Ferentz. Again, we'll talk more about that with David Eickholt at that second segment here on Cornstalks and Sports Talk on AM 950 KOEL and KOEL.com, coming up that second segment. Now, one thing I do want to talk about briefly, because I want to get to this with Nick Osen at some point in time. Tom Manning was fired from Iowa State, as well as Dave Andrews. I believe that was Friday. Today, Friday, as I'm recording this. And honestly, I mean, truth be told, I think that's how it's going to end in Iowa City too, is these guys are going to be gone by the end of the season, because Kirk is very much, we're not going to fire anybody mid-season, and you just got to do it now. But with that, I mean, it's a class act move by Matt Campbell, the way he addressed it to the media. saying it's a tough decision because people's families are involved and you don't want to do that. And it's always tough. And I like that from Matt Campbell, but he's also no nonsense. That's why I really have a lot of respect for Matt Campbell. He gets in, he gets the job done, but we're not messing around. We don't have these family ties. We don't have an unnecessary partiality towards guys that would prevent our football program from being successful. There you go. Now, I want to sum it up and put it together with this Todd Brommelkamp tweet that I saw. He said, Tom Manning was a college teammate of Matt Campbell's. He coached under Campbell at Toledo and ISU. Campbell was an usher in Manning's wedding. College football is a business. There is no room for sentimentality. Boom. Bang. Done. No room for nepotism either. And boy, is it flooding the streets of Iowa City. Anyway, with all of that, Nate Scheelhaus is, and I'm assuming that's how you pronounce it, he'll be the interim OC, which I find interesting. And again, we're just hitting this quick because I don't know enough about the situation, and I want to get somebody on that knows more about Iowa football and the situation going forward and who they're going to hire, et cetera. But for now, Nate Scheelhaus, I believe he was a quarterback at Illinois when I was in middle school, so quite a while ago. But he'll be the interim offensive coordinator, and I don't know exactly what that means because the season's over. Like, are you going to bring this guy in and keep running offensive things that you would have run with Tom Manning? Or are you going to have him install a different offense and then have a different OC come in and possibly fill in for Nate and have Nate be demoted, maybe go somewhere else? What does interim offensive coordinator at the end of the season mean? Just go hire somebody. That's really the only perplexing thing to me. But anyway, Matt Campbell firing Tom Manning, of course, after that 4-8 season and just going 1-8 in the Big 12 with the lowest scoring offense in the conference. That's what you do. You move on. You say, that sucks. We're going to miss you, but this is what we got to do. And that's the way you handle it as a head coach. Obviously, I think a lot of people wanted Brian Ferentz to be gone a lot sooner than he was in Iowa City, but I will be utterly and completely shocked if he's back for 2023. I don't know. I mean, the way Iowa has handled it to this point has been surprising, at times shocking, at times incredibly frustrating. And so who knows? Who frickin' knows what Kirk's going to do with his son and what the plan will be. But I just have no idea how you come back from this type of season and say, hey, yeah, we're going to give you another shot. And they're your 88th best ranked offense ever in your tenure here. We're gonna have you come back. I don't know how that would work, but anyway, we got to get some UNI talk here on this morning edition of Corn Stalks and Sports Talk, the Saturday morning edition of Corn Stalks and Sports Talk on AM 950 KOEL and KOEL.com. Several UNI football players have entered the portal. We've talked about a few of them here on Corn Stalks and Sports Talk, but there are 6 guys, none that are really, groundbreaking necessarily. There are a couple names that I was excited about going into the season that we never really saw. Miguel Edwards and Peter Udoibach, who we, again, have talked about a little bit here on Corn Stalks and Sports Talk. Udoibach entered before that last game of the season, or maybe even the second to last game against South Dakota State. He's a transfer from Minnesota who was a preferred walk-on there, got an offer at UNI. He has yet to receive an offer out of the portal. I would imagine that it'll be a lower-tier FCS program that he ends up at because it'll be his third school. He was on the fringe. He was second string in camp and then was moved down to third string before the season started. And I know that frustrated him, and he never really could break through that glass ceiling, I guess, and he decided to move on. It's just wide receiver group is incredibly deep, and we'll address that here in a second. And then Miguel Edwards, who we've talked about a little bit, I think, again, from what I was told and what I saw, I believe it was mid-game against Missouri State, and Edwards was not happy that he was not on the field and not playing anything more than special teams, so he went to the locker room at halftime, undressed, got into the stands, and was done. and now he's in the portal, and he's going to be at his 5th school. So whatever you have to say about that, whatever you think about that, I'm just going to leave it there and let you formulate your own opinions. I don't know what's going on in the kid's personal life or anything like that, but 5 schools is a lot. So then there was Reed Snitker, who had been on the team for a little while, just got his first D1 offer, several D2 offers out of the portal so far. D1 offer was Drake, though, and that's the Pioneer League, so not really an offer, not a scholarship offer. But Snitker, he has a barrage of D2 offers right now. He'll probably announce before the semester, I would imagine. And I don't have any sources on that or anything. That's just a guess. He has 2 years of eligibility left, and he'll probably end up playing D2 on scholarship, maybe fringe FCS program. We'll see on him, but then there are a few other guys that entered the portal. Again, not really anybody that had a huge impact on the field this season, but very well could have in future seasons. They just didn't want to wait. They want to play now, and fair enough. I get that. With the way the transfer portal is set up currently, and probably will be for the future, it only makes sense for guys to enter when they don't think they're going to get playing time anytime soon. And so let's see here. The next one so we're trying to do these in chronological order. Next one was Matt Morrissey, which, again, I totally understand. He's a quarterback that has, I believe, 2 years of eligibility left, coming from community college, and he got an endorsement on Twitter from Coach Reeder, which is good. Good for him, and Coach Reeder really supportive, clearly, of him looking for other opportunities, and yeah, he does have 2 years of eligibility left, as I see here. Like I've said on this show before, Morrissey can sling it, man. Dude can sling it, and he clearly sees that. And I to me, in previous iterations of UNI offenses, before the Theo Day and Bodie Reeder era, I could see Morrissey being a starter for this UNI football team. Kid can sling it. We never really got to see him in game action at the D1 level, so do with that what you will. But again, I think it makes a lot of sense for him because he's not going to surpass Theo Day. He's just not. It'd take a lot for anybody to surpass what Theo Day did this last season, because that was probably the greatest season we've seen from a UNI quarterback at this level. So Morrissey in the portal as well. I haven't seen any offers for any of these guys other than Snitker, so we'll see what happens. Miguel Edwards may have had some offers by now. He's not really one to announce on Twitter, not super active there. So we'll see what happens for him. Morrissey will probably announce. Udoibach will probably announce, and then these 2 other guys will probably announce too. Terrence Kamara, wide receiver, who I know a lot of people were excited about when he came in from Minnesota. I believe it was Minneapolis area where he was from, coming out of high school. Very highly recruited kid. I believe he was originally committed to Air Force before deciding to decommit and then choosing UNI. He was recruited by some from pretty solid programs. I believe he was a 2-star out of high school, and moved around positions quite a bit at UNI, running back, slot receiver, returner, doing a lot of things, a lot of speed. I didn't necessarily see much in practice that impressed me with Kamara. What I did see on film from high school and his track record there was really, really, really impressive. So I think UNI was really just trying to get him on the field one way or another, and I don't blame him. I mean, the kid's crazy fast, super elusive, very agile. In the minutes that we got to see, or the snaps that we got to see from him against Western Illinois in 2021, I was really impressed. I really liked watching him at the running back position. I don't see him as a receiver based on what I saw again at practice, and I only got to go to so many this fall. So definitely not the full story on Kamara. I think he can go somewhere else and be productive. He has 3 years of eligibility left, which is great for him. I think, again, back to Udoibach, man. I mean, this wide receiving group is absolutely freaking loaded. I mean, with Quan, Dion, Kamara, and Udoibach gone, it's still just stacked. You got Sam Schnee, of course, Sergio Morency, Desmond Hudson, Possibly Logan Wolf coming back. He has plenty of eligibility. Tyson Kershaw, Brady McCullough, and Grant Larkin stepping into the fold. And we haven't even seen anything from DeVale Washington. Plus, signing day is coming up in less than 2 weeks. So who knows what's going to happen as far as the rest of the wide receiving group goes. Who knows if they're going to get another guy out of the portal, because they were offering receivers in the portal too. I think they want to add another slot guy in addition to Sam Schnee, just to have that sort of dual threat there and mix things up. Maybe get a returner too, because Quan Hampton, Dom Williams, and McShane and Kamara are all gone. So they probably want to get a dynamic guy who can return punts too, unless they want to put Josh Jenkins back there to return kicks and punts. I don't see who else would do that other than Wu, who did a little bit of it last season. Wu Governor. That could definitely be a possibility. We'll see here who they get in the portal and more. And then lastly, Jonathan Phoenix was here for one season in Cedar Falls. Before that, he was at Houston, and then at Northern Arizona, and then at UNI, and now he's in the portal as well. So another journeyman, so to speak, in college football. He is getting out of Cedar Falls. We likely will not see him once again. So not only UNI losing Benny Sapp, Corby Sander, and Javon Brecky to graduation, but also Phoenix and Edwards to the portal. So defensive backfield going to look very, very, very different in 2023. Obviously, Stephon Black and Wu will still be around, but I genuinely don't know who the starting safeties and such will be. I'm assuming it's going to be DeJuan Mack and Dale-Shawn Staley. Edwin Dearman might be in that mix too if somebody fills that void at nickel linebacker. So many different things can happen. I'm definitely continuing to pay attention to the transfer portal every day, seeing if guys, whether they enter or they decide to commit to UNI, and I know Ethan Petrick's on top of that as well. So we'll be doing our best to keep you updated. Of course, we'll probably have Ethan on throughout basketball season, and then as things transpire with recruiting and the transfer portal. So once again, my folks, my name is Eliot Clough at Eliot Clough on Twitter. We'll be right back with that second segment. David Eickholt and I talking transfer portal news for the Iowa Hawkeyes. Stick around for more Cornstalks and Sports Talk. Before we start this second segment here on Cornstalks and Sports Talk on Saturday morning, I want to remind you that I recorded this spot with David Eickholt from 24/7 Sports on Thursday of this week, so it was right after Keegan Johnson announced he'd be entering the portal. We do allude to the fact that there might be other things happening with Cade McNamara and, of course, some other receivers, i.e. Arlen Bruce, who announced he'd be transferring yesterday. So we don't quite get into it with the specifics like that, but we do address plenty of things that are still relevant, despite the fact that Cade had not announced and neither had Arlen. So here's this clip with David Eickholt and I on the transferring and everything going on at Iowa. More transfers going on at Iowa for the Hawkeye football program. On to talk with us now on Cornstalks and Sports Talk here on AM 950 KOEL and KOEL.com. His friend of the show and regular guest, David Eickholt from 24/7 Sports and HawkeyeInsider. We're recording on Thursday here. David, the news just broke about an hour ago. Keegan Johnson entering the transfer portal. Initial thoughts? Are you surprised?
No, there's been rumors about this for a number of weeks. Obviously, we've almost asked Coach Ferentz about Keegan every single week. This is not a surprise, but it doesn't mitigate how big of a loss it is. I mean, I've been on the record with you and several other places. I said he could be Iowa's best wide receiver in 2 decades. I mean, he's got that kind of upside. Did struggle with injuries throughout a little bit. But, nobody can blame, if you're a fan of the program, media members, nobody can blame any wide receiver for transferring out of the University of Iowa right now. The Iowa had 2 wide receivers with double-digit catches this past season, 2 wide receiver receiving touchdowns. It's abysmal at every single level, and it's a failure at every single level. And I think, the current guys are probably looking at what Charlie Jones did at Purdue, and I think that that's the most damning thing on this coaching staff. Now, don't take just the raw statistical data for what it's worth. Purdue plays a different style than Iowa. That's completely fine, right? But it's still, Charlie Jones was up for the Blitnikoff, had one of the best seasons in the country for a wide receiver after being underutilized at Iowa. But like I said, I think the Keegan thing makes a lot of sense. I'm very intrigued. I know a couple early schools. Nebraska is obviously going to probably go hard after him. Remember, his father was a great, great player for them in the 90s, won a couple national championships. I'd also look at Notre Dame. I think Notre Dame's going to put the full court press on Keegan Johnson. They loved him coming out of high school. If they had offered, Keegan might have flipped, but Notre Dame was full at the time, so they weren't able to offer. So again, it's not really too big of a surprise if you've been a part of Hawkeye Insider and the message board. Not that I've spread it, but obviously, there's been smoke about this for a while. So, and I think people need to realize this, since we're talking about transfers, this is a new era of college football. Yes, it still has a damning effect on the coaching staff and the scheme. But at the same time, this is going to become the normal. And I think this year you're going to see Iowa attack the transfer portal because they have no choice but to embrace the transfer portal.
So we'll get to Padilla, speaking of which, in a little bit here. But just with where the wide receiving group is at right now, obviously you lose Sam Laporta to a tight end who's going to the NFL after this season. How do you right the ship? Do you start by firing your receivers coach? Do you start by going to the portal? Do you start by going to high schoolers and say, hey, we're flipping things around, even though maybe that's not the case?
I think that's a big question that Kirk has to answer. And I think he has to answer it sooner rather than later, because I think with the players having more rights than they ever have, if they waited till after signing day, players could get a letter of intent if their position coach gets fired. They could request a transfer. I mean, there are things in place that could save them. And I think Iowa has to have a plan in place if they're going to fire coaches. But at the same time, why prolong the inevitable? I think you look at Iowa's receiving numbers. I think you look at the high number of wide receiver transfers that have left the program. I like Kellen Copeland, one of my favorite interviews. I just look at the production. I look at the way Iowa's recruiting. I see a very, very tough scenario where he can stay on staff. It's not my job to call for his head. Thankful for that. But at the same time, I think, you look around, I think him and Brian, I think they both need to go. I think George Barnett, the offensive line coach, has another year because I think he inherited a room full of juniors and seniors that have not been able to contribute. So he's been working with freshmen and sophomores. I think you got to give him a little bit more time. But no, it's going to be very interesting. I think you have to make the changes sooner rather than later. And then I think Iowa needs to go all in on Cade McNamara. And I know that's been a heavy talking point for the past 72 hours for Iowa fans. And there is some real traction behind that. But you try to get Cade McNamara on early. He can announce at any time he's a graduate transfer. So he doesn't have to wait for that December 5th, kind of time frame. But I think if you get Cade McNamara, you say, hey, look, go out, recruit. You're well respected across the country. Start a college football playoff game. Go recruit guys we can bring in. Talk to our current guys and see if they'll want to stay. Because I'll go back to what I said the first question. You really can't blame anybody for looking to get out of this Iowa offense. That's a receiver. If you're a tight end or running back, I think you should stay the course. But again, wide receivers, you can't defend it.
With the mention of McNamara, well, let's shift to the quarterback situation because there are so many moving parts here. Obviously, Padilla in the portal. Petrus has another year left of eligibility. Then you got Joey Labus and the possibility of McNamara. Let's talk about a scenario where you flip positions with Kirk Ferentz. What's the ideal here?
You get Cade McNamara. I mean, look, the reality is, I'm very intrigued if Spencer Petrus wants to come back for his 6th year. If you're Kirk, you can't start him. I like Spencer. I respect Spencer. He's been very, very good to us, media members, transparent, thorough answers, grade A human. You can't start him. If you thought Iowa's offense is a national punchline this season, it'll be worse next season if Petrus is the starter. But, from early indications, I believe Joey Labus is going to start Iowa's bowl game. There's nothing finalized about that. I'm sure we'll get some confirmation from Kirk. Maybe on Sunday, maybe he'll play it off. Say, we'll see where he's at. But I think it's a perfect opportunity to throw Joe Labus in there, get him in bowl prep, let him work with the ones. Because remember, Petrus got hurt in the first quarter of that Nebraska game. So I think, you start Joe Labus, go all in on Cade McNamara, and then you just recruit perimeter talent, and you go all in on that. So, and I think also what's telling is I understand Iowa fans being skeptical about Iowa using the portal. But when every media member is telling you Iowa's looking at, and you have a former 4-star running back already scheduling a visit to Iowa, they're looking to use the portal this season. This is not going to be like, okay, we're going to look for a right fit here, right fit there. They know all hands have to be on deck, because the reality is if they go into another situation where they have 2 scholarship wide receivers available for the first 2 weeks, that's a failure. I don't care how many injuries there are. You need to make room for more scholarship receivers, and they need to make it more appealing. And on top of the recruiting K and everything, number one thing Iowa has to do, they have to redo their route trees. The route trees are horrible. It does not allow for separation, takes too long to develop, and it makes it nearly impossible for a receiver to succeed.
Again, we're talking with David Eickholt from HawkeyeInsider and 24/7 Sports here on AM 950 KOEL and KOEL.com for Cornstalks and Sports Talk. With all of that said about the quarterback situation, the way looking forward with possibly McNamara, Labus starting that bowl game, do you think he's then the heir apparent to McNamara, or are they looking that far ahead?
I think Iowa's worst nightmare is they get Cade McNamara and Joe Labus throws for like 3 touchdowns and 250 in the bowl game. Because Cade can't go through spring practice. He's fresh off another surgery he had in November. But again, this is a guy that I think could thrive in a pro-style system. Cade can. And again, he's one of the most respected leaders on Michigan. The amount of praise I've heard from talking to sources and reading between the lines. This is a guy that wasn't going to – everybody knew J.J. McCarthy was going to start. I know they had an open competition. But it's funny to me, too, really quick. Iowa fans are saying, I'd be underwhelmed with Cade McNamara. Who do you think you are to be underwhelmed with anybody right now? You're fresh off 2 embarrassing years of quarterback play, no matter who's lined up under center. Cade McNamara started a college football playoff game and helped lead a team that beat you 42-3 in the Big Ten championship. Let's not get crazy here. And the other part is Cade McNamara was one of the teammates selected to go to the Big Ten Media Days as a backup quarterback, as a likely backup quarterback. I think that speaks volumes to the type of person he is. I think that that's a perfect culture fit for Iowa. He can come in and, learn the system. He's playing the Big Ten, which I think Kirk will be kind of ears perked up. Okay, he's kind of gotten some of that good reputation heading into it. But it'll be very interesting to see how it all unfolds. But the other side of it, too, with the way the transfer portal is, if Cade says, I want to play 2 or 3 years, and Joe Labus balls out, what's he going to do? And again, I'm not suggesting that he's saying anything to anybody about things, but that's not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying it's all hypothetical at the moment. Would he stay to be that number 2 guy? And if he's not, then you have a redshirt freshman next year in Carson May.
Yeah, of course.
Assuming Petrus doesn't come back, by the way. That's for full disclosure. If Petrus comes back, Petrus has to be on the bench.
Can he come back and I don't know why this would prohibit him, but he can come back and transfer, right?
Correct.
That's the move. Am I wrong? Yeah. Okay. And in regards to possibly that, but also Alex Padilla, do you see a transfer to a Group of 5 school, maybe going back home closer to Colorado? Colorado State's taking anybody and everybody after the season they just had. But is it a Group of 5 transfer that you see coming for Padilla?
I think so. Look, he's undefeated as a starter at Iowa. That's what you got to remember as well. I think he's got some ties to Colorado State. I wish I had the note in front of me. I believe his dad was a standout player for Colorado State, or at least somewhere in Colorado. So if that's the case, I think it makes a lot of sense. But I think Padilla is also going to look around for the best opportunity. I don't see a Power 5 school take. I just don't think there's enough film there. But I think he'd make a pretty good Group of 5 quarterback.
That and from what I've seen, UNI has a transfer from Michigan State that did pretty well at the FCS level and has definitely garnered some attention. So who knows? Maybe Padilla gets an offer from a power in the FCS and decides to play there. But any other expectations regarding the portal going forward for Iowa? Positions that you expect guys to maybe leave, or that they're really going to go hard after to bring guys in, maybe other than wide receiver, but you can include that position too.
Yeah, I think, first of all, there's no player that's safe after Iowa's offense. And if I'm Kirk Ferentz, And again, this is not something I'm hearing. This is something what I would prioritize if I was Kirk. Number one, you have to keep Caleb Johnson. You just have to, because I think Caleb Johnson is a first or second team All Big Ten back next year. And people need to realize what he did this season was all skill. He did not know who to block. He did not know the scheme yet. They put him on the field and said, go, and he made it happen. So he's going to take that big of a jump next year, in my opinion. So you have to find a way to keep him. I would keep a very close eye on Iowa, maybe losing a couple more perimeter pieces. On the offense, I'm not going to specify names. I don't think it's fair to the players. I don't think it's fair to the school, especially if they end up changing their mind. So I'm a believer of let them announce it, even if I do know for a fact, just to be the most fair. And if I'm Iowa, I look for an offensive line transfer. I think you can look at maybe an interior guy. I still believe in Mason Richmond on the edge. I think Connor Colby's got a big comeback season next year. And assuming Iowa holds on to Caden Proctor, you throw Caden Proctor at tackle immediately and let him start, because he's going to be a mauler. Maybe look at guard. Maybe look at center. I think Logan Jones can still be very good. He's still new to the position. But the snap issues 12 games in, you just can't have it at that point. So unless he has a big bowl prep, and he could, because Tyler Linderbaum switched positions in bowl prep, and he had an outstanding bowl prep and outstanding spring. Logan did not switch till spring. So I think that's something worth noting as well. So maybe Iowa looks for a defensive tackle to help build some depth there, but I also don't know how much playtime they can promise, because you look at Iowa's D-line next year, if Joe Evans comes back, you have him. Lucas Van Ness is going to be a top 10, top 15 pick next year if he does not leave this year. He's a first-round pick right now, maybe an early second based on what I'm hearing. And then Aaron Graves will be a monster. Y.A. Black, Deontay Craig led the team in sacks. I mean, Iowa's defensive line's loaded. Maybe Iowa goes after a cornerback as well, just because of how many injuries there were this year. It does not sound like Terry Roberts is going to return next year based on Kirk Ferentz's comments, but, he still might. Maybe they go after a cornerback as well. So those would be some positions I'd keep an eye on. I would not think safety, because I think Xavier Wampa is going to take over for Kayvon Merriweather. They'll have Quinn Schulte for another year, who I thought had a great year. And Iowa's got Justin Jacobs back, it sounds like, for next season, which is a huge, huge boost to that defense.
And who knows what position Cooper DeJean is going to play, of course.
Everywhere.
Right.
People want him at quarterback at this point, man.
He was awesome in high school, that's for sure. Any update on his health going into the bowl game?
Yeah, nothing official. I think when we talked to Kirk last time, he basically just said he got an encouraging report on him after the game. I don't think it was a concussion protocol. It honestly looked like he just got knocked out for a few seconds. I mean, I thought could have been a helmet to helmet on Nebraska, quite frankly. There are a couple of them they didn't review. It is what it is. But it does, from all indications early on, it does sound like he's going to play in the bowl game.
Last thing before we let you go, David. You mentioned Caden Proctor very briefly. I know Sean's more the recruiting guy for you at HawkeyeInsider, but do you have any gauge as to how much, one, the transfers, two, how the offense is performing, and three, Oregon are all three influencing where he's at right now, 2 weeks before that early signing period?
I think people need to keep in mind this for Iowa fans. When you recruit blue blood talent, this is normal. You look at Georgia, look at Ohio State, look at Alabama. When they get commits early, they will take late visits. If you want to recruit with the big boys, you have to live with it. Caden Proctor is getting all in from Oregon. Alabama's still talking to him, trying to get him on campus as well. And, I think the reality is, Iowa really backed off recruiting him after he committed for a couple weeks. And Caden's still being courted by all these blue bloods. I think it was a big learning lesson for Iowa to say, you know what? We believe they're committed, but we got to keep up with them. We got to keep recruiting them. So at this moment in time, I'm not going to sit here and say he signs with Iowa, but I know the feeling in Iowa City is very good. And they believe he's going to enroll early at Iowa too, which I think is a big, big key to this entire component. Oregon still thinks they have some ground to make up. Alabama is probably not going to get him on campus before signing day, so that kills them, I think. But it's Bama. Anything can happen. I think Iowa feels pretty good about where they're at. I would give them a 65 to 70% chance of signing him. Again, with NIL, with everything else going on, it's so tough for me to sit here and rip off a bold, hot take, even if I hear, he's a lock to this school. I've heard so many crazy stories that I'm avoiding doing that, but I do think that Iowa's in a good spot for him.
NIL definitely makes college sports the wild, wild west. That's for sure. Again, David Eickholt on joining us here on Corn Stalks and Sports Talk on AM 950 KOEL and KOEL.com. Go give him a follow on Twitter for all the Iowa news and that incredible header I'm looking at right now. It's at David Eickholt on Twitter. Thanks so much, man.
Hey, thanks, man.
All right, don't go anywhere. We got one more segment left. Alyssa Hertel from the Des Moines Register, who's a Drake basketball beat writer and recruiting reporter there for the sports department. She's joining us on our final segment. Stay right here on AM 950 KOEL and KOEL.com for more Corn Stalks and Sports Talk. Drake men's basketball suffered their first loss of the season on Wednesday night against Indiana State at Indiana State, who appears to be legit this season. So on to talk with us now about that first loss and the upcoming schedule for Drake is beat writer for the Des Moines Register, Alyssa Hertel. Alyssa, like I mentioned, first loss of the season the other night for the Bulldogs. What did the Sycamores do that maybe other teams haven't been able to do so far this season?
I think for starters, it's not exactly what they did to Drake, but what they're able to do on their own team. I mean, Cameron Henry and Cooper Neese have been kind of mainstays for this program for a while. I think everyone kind of knows what to expect from them at this point. I think Robbie Avila coming in as a freshman and kind of doing what he's been able to do, it surprised me. I don't think I'm alone in that feeling. And so I think the way that those three play, you throw in a couple of the other guys that are in the starting lineup, Jason, Trenton, those guys, I think they just have a core that works really well together. And I say that especially because when you look at what they were able to do or, force Drake to not do, I mean, in any game where you have one player, Roman Penn in this case, score over 30 points, typically you would win that game. And I think, Drake got close to doing that. They had a lead at one point. They came back from being behind in the first half. And so I think it was just the fact that Indiana State, when it came down to the wire, was able to play a better complete game. Whereas, they were able to hold off Tucker more than he has been this year. Darnell was able to get in there, but, DJ and Garrett and Sardaar were all kind of held off too. And so I think, obviously Roman stood on his head, had an insane game. But Indiana State just had more players that were able to play a complete minute-to-minute game.
And so when you're talking about what Indiana State brought to the table, playing a complete game, we never really saw that last season from Indiana State. I mean, a little bit here and there, right? I mean, they play really well in their home arena. Could you get a gauge of what has flipped for them this season? Is it just what's on the roster, who's available, or is it second-year coach really starting to figure things out?
Yeah, I mean, I wish I could say I saw this coming. I saw Indiana State being superb this year, but I can't lie. I know what I ranked them on my poll, and it was not in the top 5, I don't believe. And so, I didn't expect them to play this way. This was a game that I thought Drake was going to go in and it would be competitive, but not the way it was. And I do think, Cameron and Cooper are coming back. They're healthy. They're playing the way that, everyone kind of expected them to play together. And then again, you throw in this insane freshman who I think is a big game changer for them. And I think those are all factors. And like you said, you have a second-year coach. Getting that first year in the MVC under your belt, like that, the MVC we all know isn't an easy conference to play in. And I'm sure it's not an easy conference to come and coach in either. And so to get that first year out of the way, you now have, the spring and the summer that you were with your team preparing without games where it's just that team focus. I think that's invaluable time. And we're seeing, the results of all of that now.
And Josh Schertz coming in also had a decent amount of transfers after this year and being able to figure it out that quickly and bring some guys into. Robbie Avila, probably the steal of the MVC and the recruiting in 2022 recruiting class this last year. With the goggles and everything, the way he plays basketball, I can tell he's going to be just hated by MVC fans around the conference. But UNI fans will see that here soon enough too. So prior to this game for Drake, they had a few single digit wins, nothing that was crazy in terms of blowouts for some of these victories. Had they been tested prior to Indiana State?
Yeah, I mean, I saw even against Louisiana last week, it was kind of because I got to see that one in person, they were at home. I kind of expected Drake to play better than the way they were. I mean, Louisiana was playing great as well. Those were two undefeated teams. And Drake did pull out the win, but I felt like Louisiana really gave them a run for their money in certain aspects of the game. And I think, it's funny looking at Wednesday's game to now, because one of the things that I talked to Coach DeVries about after the Louisiana game is that had been 3 straight games where they had been outscored in the second half. So they'd been, they built enough of a lead, but then teams managed to figure them out pretty quickly and come back. And it was actually the opposite against Indiana State, where they outscored them in the second half. But I think, Drake, some people have looked at their non-conference schedule and, asked them to schedule competitive teams, which to an extent I do agree with. And I do think, looking at how Indiana State played, it is kind of concerning how close some of those non-conference teams did play them. And so I think, that's going to leave a lot of questions now that they have their first conference game under their belt, how they're going to be able to compete against MVC teams, where I think I would say in my very, very short time here, there's a lot of teams this year that can compete for the title.
Alyssa Hertel, Drake basketball beat writer, joining us here on Cornstalks and Sports Talk on this Saturday morning on AM 950 KOEL and KOEL.com, talking about that loss to Indiana State and a little bit more of their upcoming schedule. So no ranked teams with that schedule. Obviously, we talked about some of those closer games, Wyoming, Tarleton State, and I believe there's another one in there against a major program. Now they'll face Richmond, who UNI lost to fairly recently, St. Louis, who I think Murray State played them at the beginning of the season, and then Mississippi State here soon. So comparing non-conference schedule to a team like a UNI, do you think that Drake's schedule is good enough? Let's say they don't win the MVC tournament. Do they get an at-large bid if they continue to play the way they're playing right now? What do they have to do to get an at-large bid if they don't win the MVC tournament outright?
I think the obvious one is that they will have to win the rest of their non-conference games. I think they need that padding in their schedule, especially like you said, you don't have any ranked opponents in there. And you look at who else teams in the MVC alone are playing versus who Drake's playing. And so you need to make sure that your non-conference record is bulletproof when it comes down to it, especially the way that Drake has performed in past MVC title games. It's no guarantee that they would make it in. And so I think that's the biggest thing is you have to win these games outright. And you have to win them by larger margins than you have. There has to be better performances in those games than what they've shown in the beginning of the year.
With all that said, heading into the MVC conference play coming up here soon, obviously that's already started, but the thick of it coming up here soon, is there any team in particular in the Missouri Valley Conference that you think will give Drake trouble this season? Obviously, the loss to Indiana State, so you could throw them in there. But the Murray States, the Belmont, who's also new. Forgive me. Southern Illinois will be in that mix too. Any team in particular that you see given the Bulldogs trouble in 2022, 2023?
Yeah, Southern Illinois would be my top pick out of the ones coming up. I think they're kind of in a similar situation to Indiana State, where I look at who's on their team and how they're putting the pieces together, and how they've been able to compete against Drake in the past. I think they, not to say they have a chip on their shoulder, but I think, the way games have gone, at least since I've been here, between Drake and Southern Illinois, if I'm Southern Illinois, I want to come in this year and show them that can put all the pieces together and this is going to work out for me. Bradley was another one that I said, might probably compete really well. That was obviously before Rink's injury. But, I think that there are a lot of teams in the MVC this year, Southern Illinois being the top of my list, that could give Drake a run for their money.
I'd probably say it's about 6 deep going into the MVC tournament is what I would expect. Obviously, we can't predict injuries and stuff like that, but the MVC is going to be loaded from top to about middle, and I think it could move really easily.
Yeah, and that's so exciting to be a part of too, because obviously Drake comes in as the preseason favorite, and Coach DeVries says it all the time that means nothing. And I think it's one game into the conference, but you're seeing that teams are hungry for that top spot, and Drake is the team they have to get through to get it.
Yeah, absolutely. And honestly, with mentioning of UNI a few times here, obviously being a UNI insider for Town Square Media, I have a bit of a bias, but I think you can never count out Coach Jake and UNI come tournament time either. I mean, it's to quote, I can't even remember who said it, but Nick Schultz always tweets it out. It's the Valley. You never know what's going to happen. That in college basketball, so somebody could get hot and make a run at that MVC tournament title. But as far as Drake goes in terms of health right now, they started the season a little banged up. Roman Penn out, Tucker DeVries out, Garrett Sturtz out, at least in those exhibition games. Where's the health of Drake right now?
Yeah, so I think first of all, I think Coach DeVries is very, I don't want to say happy because you're never happy about injuries, but the fact that they happened before the season started, when notoriously he's been without at least one player come postseason. Now, we have a lot of months to get through, a lot of basketball to get through. So like you said, anything can happen. Although across the league, I wish it would not. I wish everyone would be healthy. I think the nice thing with that is, as far as I can tell, everyone's back to, I don't want to say full health, but the way they should be. In the off season, Roman, was again dealing with that same foot injury. And I know that, he underwent some work to kind of hopefully have that not impact him in the season. And so I think based on seeing how he's played, sitting out a little bit earlier, and now kind of, he sits out the first few games, he's not getting as many minutes, and then he scores 32 points. I think it's fair to say that he's feeling pretty good. DJ with his knee, I feel like, part of that coming back from an ACL tear, I feel like that's more mental than anything. You don't know what your body is going to go through. You don't know if you can play the same way. And, the way he is as a perimeter defender, he's going 110% every game. And so I think he just needed to get back in game situations. Tucker, I think, he comes out in a boot for that, I think the exhibition game, which, the next game he came out and was playing fine. And I was like, I think the boot was just a whole show. I don't actually think that. I think, obviously medical staff know what they're talking about, but I think that gave everyone a little bit more of a heart attack than it needed. And Garrett is the only one that I'm not 100% sure on, because, it was mostly just an ankle thing, not specific. I think, everyone was saying high ankle sprain, something like that. And the first few games he would come in and then he'd go off and he'd be on the bike on the sideline, just watching and kind of keeping that thing moving. And then it was pretty heavily wrapped for a few games. And so I'm not really sure if he's 100%, but I think we also know Garrett, with the hard hat mentality, is not going to sit out unless he's forced out of a game. And I think, the fact that he's played the way he has, even if his ankle isn't 100%, says enough about the type of player that Garrett is.
Again, we're talking with Alyssa Hertel, Drake men's basketball beat writer from the Des Moines Register, here on AM 950 KOEL and KOEL.com on Cornstalks and Sports Talk. Now, in regards to Tucker and his play so far this season, preseason MVC player of the year, are you seeing that type of play from him so far?
Yeah. I mean, I think the biggest thing that I remember talking to him about in the preseason was what he did in the off season. And if you look at the roster comparison, he's obviously the same height. That's not going to change. He's the same weight. But it's very obvious that he dropped weight and added muscle. He is far more conditioned to play the college game than he was last year. And so you take the fact that he's shooting just as well, he's performing just as well as he did as a freshman, but now he can keep up with the game even better. That's pretty dangerous. Now, we saw that Indiana State was able to shut that down, but he was also the second highest scorer on the team. So he can still produce even if he's not having those 20 plus point games. And I think, he's going to be dangerous as long as he stays in the MVC for a couple more years.
I'm telling you, the similarities between he and AJ Green from first to second year are definitely there. So we'll see if he can make that happen and win that MVC Player of the Year award. Last thing before we let you go, Alyssa, Sardaar Calhoun has been as advertised, at least from what I've been able to see. He appears to be a guy who, if Tucker goes down, God forbid, if Roman Penn goes down, Calhoun can step up and fill that scoring void. He looks like an athlete, a defender. And again, this is from a small sample size that I've seen. But what can you tell us about Calhoun and his play, obviously coming from Florida State and Texas Tech?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing with him for me is I think personality-wise, he fits the type of player that Coach DeVries tries to bring into the program. And I think that's why he's been so successful. I mean, for starters, he transferred in January. So in terms of the transfer portal, he's the one in the MVC that's been with the team the longest. And he was able, because of transfer rules, wasn't able to play, was able to basically just be with and around the team for 6 whole months before, summer practices and stuff like that pick up. And so I think that's a big deal in the fact that he already knows the team before the season started. And then he comes in and, the first few games, he's getting serious minutes when the other guys were out and injured, and performing really, really well. He can score from all over the place. He's super successful from 3-point range. I think that has something to do with the fact that his vertical is insane. It feels like it's 2 or 3 feet. I don't know if that's necessarily true, but he can jump and he can rebound and he can assist. And he is just the type of overall player that Drake needed with both Trammell and Tank graduating. He's like a combination of the two all in one, and can just do a little bit of everything. And now I might be biased. I think he's the type of player that should be getting more time than he is. I know it's tough with the guys that Drake returned, and you want to get them playing time, and they've been playing together forever. But seeing how the Bulldogs performed with him in more of a starting role versus him as a bench player now, I'm not a coach, but I would say that I think he earned his right to get some more playing time. And if things start to change in game situations, then I'm wrong.
There you go. She is Alyssa Hertel from the Des Moines Register, covers Drake men's basketball there. Go give her a follow if you want to follow along with Drake, but also high school and recruiting for the Register at Alyssa Hertel on Twitter. Alyssa, we appreciate you. Thanks so much for hopping on.
Happy to be here.
And that's going to do it for this weekend episode of Cornstalks and Sports Talk. Thanks so much for tuning in today. If you missed any part of today's show, you can always listen on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, and YouTube, of course, to those guest segments. While you're there on YouTube, drop a like, drop a comment, and make sure to subscribe. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, please leave that rate and review, subscribe, follow, all that. It's so greatly appreciated, and it does help us out so much. Every time that happens, we get an uptick in listens, and that means we're going to be able to get you better content here on Cornstalks and Sports Talk on AM 950, KOEL, and KOEL.com. So my name is Eliot Clough, at Eliot Clough on Twitter. I'm a UNI insider for Town Square Media, and that was another week's episode of Cornstalks and Sports Talk.